Hello everyone, my name is Somil Gupta. I'm an AI strategy and monetization advisor. I help companies in commercializing their data and AI solutions, in developing digital business, and in monetizing technological assets. Today, let's talk about monetization. So, after a better part of a decade of piloting and pioneering AI solutions, let's see where we are right now. What we see is that more than two-thirds of the total AI initiatives fail to deliver returns, and 40% of companies making significant investments report that they have not made any significant business gains from AI. And only 12% of the global use cases have crossed the experimental stage and become mainstream. So what's happening? And this is the picture at the macro level. On the micro level, when we talk to companies, this is what we find out. Companies often report, these questions or these challenges while they're working with data and AI. So the typical questions that they ask is, okay, how do we prioritize ideas? How do we price new offerings? How do we monetize our old investments? How do we build multiple revenue streams? How do we find our niche? So if you look at it from a very if you have a high level view, it will feel like these questions are quite unrelated. But when you look closely, you realize that all these problems, all these challenges are very closely related to just one topic, and that is monetization. Now, what is monetization? Now, when we talk about monetization, we often believe that monetization is linked to sales and revenue, which is true. But monetization goes much deeper. And the way I define it, monetization is the process of unlocking the latent value of data and AI assets for better financial performance. So if you're not unlocking the value, then if you're not making it available, if you're not making it usable, then companies face challenges. And what are some challenges? So what is the impact of lack of a coherent monetization strategy? So the first impact is the investments are locked into pilots. Companies invest a lot of their time and effort in building these assets, and when these technology assets are not out in the market, when they are not deployed, right, then they tend to when they're not monetized, they tend to choke the downstream investment pipeline. Similarly, if the ideas are not monetized, then you have underutilized technology potential, because any technology requires when it is out in the market, it lives and breathes and it grows and expands. But if you don't take it out, then you really hamper its growth and progress. You have low ROI and profitability, which is obvious, because if the adoption of the solution is slow, and if it takes a longer time, then it kills the ROI and it kills the profitability. There is very little market feedback. So now we know that agile development kind of strives on market feedback. But if you're not monetizing your application, if you're not commercializing your applications, then most companies mostly they end up working on assumptions, and without the market feedback, it becomes very difficult to make or develop real solutions that the customers need. There's very little validation, and it becomes very expensive to do a course correction after you've reached a certain development milestone. Similarly, there's a limited realized value, because users are not using the application, and there's a weak commercial offering. So a lot of companies have great technological products, but they have really weak commercial offering when it comes to value proposition, when it comes to pricing. And these are some of the core issues with a product or with a solution that's very difficult to fix later on in the development. That's why it's important to have monetization right from the beginning of your development. Now, this is what I say. I say monetization is the heart of data and AI initiatives, because monetization drives the benefit realization, it drives the returns, but it also drives sustainability and scalability of the solution. It also boosts morale of all those who are working, because now they can see their work, their hard work out in the world, making the real impact. But understanding monetization can be a little bit tricky. let me give an example. Let's imagine that your AI solution, the latest one that you're working on, is like a Ferrari. So we have so many people here in this right here in this conference who know everything about how to build a Ferrari, how to build the AI solution. So they are data scientists, they are data engineers, and they know everything about the costs or what it takes to build the Ferrari. Then we have people who know how to operate and run the Ferrari. So we have people working on the ML ops, on the DevOps, the different technology platforms. So we also know what it costs to run and operate the Ferrari. But when you ask someone, if you ask a business person, what do you think about AI? What do you think about the Ferrari as a business asset? Like, would you like to own it? Then it becomes a bit tricky because the value of the asset depends upon how you're using it. If you're simply keeping your Ferrari parked in the garage, there is absolutely no returns, right? And it's a very poor investment. But let's say you are taking it out sometimes during such conferences or to show off to your friends. You might have some value, but it might not still justify the investment. But if you are thinking about racing, right, then you might have a very good business case. So the value of an asset, the value of your investment depends upon how good or how effectively you're able to monetize it. What is it that you're going to do with it? And that becomes a bit tricky with data and AI because if you ask businesses how they want to use their data and AI assets, they don't know, right? It's a big gap that we are trying to fulfill, but nonetheless, the gap is still there. So what happens when we come in and when we start helping our clients? We help them answer a few very fundamental questions like how to develop valuable business assets, how to develop digital business capabilities, how to align digital and traditional business. And if we see monetization on what it truly is, we see that we have the technical asset on one side, we have the business opportunity on other side, and monetization is really the bridge that connects. And when we analyze monetization from this perspective, I don't want to talk about the monetization strategy because that's a much longer discussion. But I want to explain two aspects that we focus on. The first aspect that we work very closely is how do you synchronize business development with the agile product development, because the product development is iterative, and the business development is not. So how can we make the business development more synchronized so that as the product evolves, your commercial strategy, your monetization strategy also evolves with the developing evolving product. The second area where we focus is how to enable business to own and adopt data and AI. And the reason that it happens is because the analytics, the data analytics side is highly probabilistic, and the data scientists, they live and breathe probability. But the business is not that. The business is very deterministic. So if you give an AI solution that has certain inaccuracies, and when you give it to the business, they get scared and they don't want to own it because they see a lot of risks which they are not able to quantify. They see a lot of cost which they are not able to quantify, and then because they don't understand, they just don't want to touch it, and that becomes a big hurdle in adoption and adoption and monetization of those solutions. So we solve those problems. How do we work? Let me share with you the four major areas in a very, very simple way. How do we support companies in building their monetization strategies? So the first area is to help companies build a commercial MVP. What is a commercial MVP? Just like you have a technical MVP or a minimum viable product, which has limited set of features that is designed to test and validate your assumptions. We also develop a commercial MVP. So basically we take this technical solution and we dress it up in a commercial attire. What does it mean? So for every feature that the product has, we do a minimum viable pricing. So we envision a commercial concept. How will this solution look like? How will the UI be like? How will the customer access it? How will the backend work? How will the service work? We just envision it to as much detail as possible without the product actually being developed. And this we do it at a very, very early stage, just while you're testing your hypothesis. We just take it as a step further. We work on the minimum viable packaging. How should we package this product? What should be the value proposition, what should be the contracting. We build a minimum viable contract, because what happens is when you are trying to commercialize any solution, you need to, it has to go through many different checks and balances. For example, you have to take care of the security clearances, you have to take care of your commercial margins, and these processes take a lot of time if they are done at the end. So we try to do it in the beginning, and once we have done this once, and once you have a basic commercial model ready, then you can iterate and agile along with the product development. The benefit of this approach is that, number one, while you're developing, you get the real market feedback, because we acquire real customers, and those real customers give you the real feedback. The second benefit is that even before the product gets commercialized, even before the product is built, we actually have revenue streams, because we have paying customers for the solution. The second area where we work very closely is what we call as business modeling and risk assessment. So as we discussed earlier, the business are very scared of AI, and the reason that they're scared is because they think that there is unbounded risk. The risk is not quantifiable. So we work with the business, and we try to create a framework on how to make these uncertainties and cost and risk bounded. What do we mean by bounded? That means we take different tools from finance, from strategy, from quality assurance, from risk management, and we help the business understand that what is the minimum and what is the best case and worst case scenarios. What is the worst case risk? What is the worst case cost? What is the worst case potential? What is the best case potential? So when the business starts seeing that they have control over the cost, that the cost is not unbounded, it is bounded, they have a lot more confidence, right? And again, the level of analysis depends upon how risk averse the company is. So some companies who are very, very risk averse, you need to do a very, very detailed modeling. But this really helps businesses get a confidence, and the confidence help them adopt the data and AI solutions and take it to market. The third area is helping companies build the digital business infrastructure and capabilities. So what does it mean? So when we are developing any analytical product, let's say it's creating, let's say we are doing some analysis, or we want to offer some reports. The sales side of this often requires a lot of customization. For example, some customers who are not so mature, they will say, well, can you send this report daily to us as a PDF? Some customers who are more mature, they say, okay, can you send it to, can you give us an API? Some customers will say, okay, can you integrate with our cloud backend? So different customers have different distribution requirements, and the solution needs to be able to cater to that. Another example could be when any company is offering predictive maintenance, then they realize at the end that their supply chain is not very conducive for anticipatory shipping, right? Because let's say you make a prediction and you detect that some machine is going to fail in, let's say, a week or so. But if you cannot have a decision making that is automated, right, you erode that value. So you detect that the machine is going to fail 1 or 2 weeks in advance, but then it takes you 1 week just to make a decision, because now the decision is not very deterministic. The decision is probabilistic. Someone has to take that call, and those kind of areas, those kind of capability issues is what we bridge for the business and help them deliver the digital business. The last area is business and process enablement. So this is where the rubber really hits the road. This is where we start working with people. So we imagine, or we assume, that people would be very good at data-driven decision making, and then by introducing AI, we are making their life simpler. This is not always the case, because many a times people who are used to rules, who are used to understanding that, okay, there is an option A or there's an option B. If you give them the output in terms of recommendation, so there's a 95% chance that A is applicable, they get confused. They don't know how to deal with it. Many a times they don't have the authority to take action, and such issues become very, very prominent as we offer more and more data and AI based solutions. So what we do here is that we help for the external products and services, we help the sales and marketing teams to articulate the value proposition in a simple way, to articulate the marketing message, to help them make the pitch, to help them understand what is the value behind the technology. Similarly, when we are dealing with the tools, we help the supply chain professionals or the internal professionals in adopting the tool, help them transform from passive recipients of technology to become active participants. And in this regard, we have launched training. So this year we had a training for agile supply chain, and we have also published many books. So you can see what you can see in the image below. So this books try to capture the challenges of the traditional sales guys. And we get and we got a very good feedback when someone said that, you know, finally someone is understanding our challenges. So these people need our support, and it's a journey that they are on, and we like to be a part of this journey. Now, let me give you an example of how monetization works in action. And this is a very, very simple example, and I hope you'll be able to appreciate what kind of value we create through monetization. So the customer, one of our clients was building a driver behavior analytics application. So they were collecting data from the vehicles using IoT and sensor data, and they were using this data to classify driver behavior as good, average, and bad, and it was coming out as weekly reports. And the client approached us and said, okay, can you help us monetize this? How do we create a product, a commercial offering from this solution? The key question that we asked was, first of all, what is the temporal value, right? Can we use this report over a period of time? Can I compare this week's report with last week's report? The answer was not so much, because you can't really make a lot of sense, because the drivers will keep popping in and out of different classes. So you can't have any trend information. The second question we asked is, what is the decision value? What kind of decisions can a person take? And we realized that while it's a good information, you can't take a lot of decisions based on this. What is the scalability? Well, if you have 15 or 20 drivers, it's easy, or the report makes some has some value. But the moment you have 100 drivers or 1,000 drivers, then the classification does not make much sense. So what we did, after analyzing the data, after analyzing the algorithm, we made the recommendation that it should be converted into scores. So instead of having classification, let's go for the regression. The data remains the same. Most of the data pipeline remained the same, but instead of doing classification, now we are calculating scores. And the benefits of this simple, very small change was, number one, it's very high temporal value, because you can store the scores for years, and you can compare them. It's very scalable and very high decision value, because it doesn't really matter how many drivers are there. The more the better. And one thing I like about this is that it has much higher revenue potential and higher ROI, because in the previous case you were only pricing the report, which is once a week, right, irrespective of how many drivers are there. But in this case, you can now start pricing per user or per driver. So it has much more scalability. It is much more linear. And it also opens up other applications. So we could think about smart batching to reduce training cost, or offering safety incentives, or measuring training effectiveness before and after the training, how it comes in scores, or we can do behavioral coaching. So many new opportunities, many new applications opened up. And I think the best case is that what we realized was, if you go with a traditional design thinking approach, you cannot come to this kind of a solution very easily, because when you ask 100 users, nobody will say what's missing from my life, or my biggest pain point is that I don't have scorecards, right? So monetization also gives you a different view at the problem, a different way to add value, which is, I think, quite amazing. And as a parting thought, I want to leave you with some ideas, some traps that you should avoid when it comes to monetization. Number one, don't fall in love with the technology. Don't get dazzled with technology. Technology is just an enabler. Try to abstract it as much as possible. Focus on the economics, because the economics always wins. Trap number two, don't go for knowledge, go for actionable insights. If you do not have enough actionable insights, you cannot produce results. It's the activities, it's the actions that take form of your business benefits, that become your services and processes, etc. Trap number three, do not underestimate the importance of cost and risk. If you are not modeling the risk and cost precisely, it will come up somewhere later in the later downstream in your project, and then it becomes very difficult and very costly to remove it. Trap number four, you cannot commercialize this later. I mean, you can, but then it becomes more difficult and more expensive to commercialize it. Always start with commercialization from the beginning of your project. The more you're thinking about commercialization, the easier it will be for you, and more and faster will be your time to value. And if you do not have the skills to commercialize, don't worry, dare to license, dare to partner. And trap number 5, don't build technology at the expense of business development. Try to balance your investments in technology and business development, because most companies who are new or who are on the journey of data and AI to become a data and AI driven companies, they're realizing that they do not have the capabilities, and a large share of investment has to go into developing those business capabilities. And many companies complain that, or report that they have invested all their money, spent all their money in building technology and not enough in developing their business capabilities, and that becomes very tricky. It slows down your monetization. So thank you so much. I want to end with this quote that ROI is always intentional, never accidental. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be very happy to answer your questions or to have more detailed discussion on how we can solve some of the problems that you or your company are facing. These are my details. Thank you so much.